Good evening. Welcome to this Tuesday, Let's do this again. Good evening. Welcome to this Tuesday, July 2nd, 2019 meeting of the Raymore Planning and Zoning Commission. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Let me remind commissioners, I feel like I'm in a barrel here. Let me remind commissioners, please make sure your microphone is lighted green and speak into the mic for the record. And we'll call roll. Commissioner Wiggins.
Present.
Commissioner Armstrong.
Present.
Commissioner Bowie. Commissioner Crane.
Here.
Commissioner Pfizer.
Present.
Commissioner Peterman.
Here.
Commissioner Urquia.
Present.
Mayor Turnbow.
Present.
And Commissioner Faulkner is present. This time we do have a quorum. And we have no personal appearances scheduled this evening. One item on our consent agenda, which is acceptance of minutes from our June 4th, 2019 meeting. And I would either entertain a motion to accept consent agenda or approve minutes from the June 4th meeting as you wish.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from our June 4th P&Z meeting.
I'll second.
Motion by Commissioner Urquia, second by Commissioner Peterman to accept minutes from the June 4th, 2019 meeting. All those in favor, raise a hand, please. Well, I got 5 in favor. Any opposed and abstentions? 2, 3. So the count is 5 in favor, which fortunately is just enough to approve minutes legally, and none opposed and 3 abstentions. And I presume the abstentions were all because you weren't present at that meeting. Okay.
It's nice to know what your priorities are.
So moving along. Nothing on tonight's agenda under unfinished business. Our first case under new business this evening is case 19013, Hy-Vee Fast and Fresh Fueling Station conditional use permit. This case will require a public hearing, but before we go to that, would the applicant like to come forward to the podium and present your case, please?
Mr. Chair, if I could interrupt for a brief second. Before the applicant gets started, I'm going to broadcast to the screen. The applicant has a couple inspiration and boards that he would like to go over as he goes through the presentation.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Grass. Is there one?
All right. I think the screen is going to
Okay.
move for me.
Double check. Is
it-
the light on green?
The light is on green.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
Sorry. Just having a tad trouble hearing you.
All right. Well, good evening. My name is John Brem. I'm site planner with Hy-Vee Incorporated. I'm pleased to be here tonight to introduce you to a concept that we've just started rolling out around our trade area. It's called a Fast and Fresh store. We're here to ask for a conditional use permit for probably the least interesting part of the store, which is the selling of gasoline and the fuel canopy. But we're looking at this as a convenient meal solutions store, not exactly a convenience store. The idea here is a lot of people, especially soccer moms, people like me, I'm a scout leader, have a lot of busy evenings and don't have a lot of time to collect dinner or get home for dinner. This store kind of acts as a fill-in to going to a large grocery store and spending 40 minutes to an hour filling a basket. The plan here is simple. You can order food online and have it delivered to this location, and then you can top off your order with an assortment of fresh produce inside, dairy, bakery, packaged meats, and grocery items. In addition to that, this store will also have what we call HMR, home meal replacement, which is the meatloafs, lasagnas, and things that you can pop in your oven when you get home. Meal kits that you can make from scratch. They have all the ingredients for you, similar to Blue Apron. I already mentioned the store would have an assortment of the packaged meat, bakery, produce, wine and spirits, and a coffee shop. So basically, it's a meal solution store for busy folks. If you're like me, you don't like jumping out of the car 500 feet from the back of the parking lot and walking half a mile to get a gallon of milk. This is the answer to that kind of a conundrum. I'll take any questions that you might have. We agree to, there's one condition under staff recommendations. We agree to that condition. I'm not sure there's anything else I need to present, but I'd be happy to take any of your questions.
Thank you. We have a bad habit of letting you sit down before we come up with a question. It's just sort of an unwritten tradition, but
Okay.
does anybody on the commission have a question at the moment for the applicant? Okay, thanks. No, I think we're good.
You good?
Thank
All
you. All right, let's see. Mr. Grass? Do you have the staff report for us?
Let's keep that up on the screen. Yes, sir, thank you. And just to clarify, do you all have control over your computers again now? Perfect.
Yep. Okay.
So as Mr. Brand indicated, the applicant is requesting a conditional use permit for the operation of a fueling station as a small component of their overall concept for the development of this site here at 58 and Fox Ridge. Again, this is located on the southwest corner of 58 and Fox Ridge Drive, is the first lot to see a proposed development that came out of the Dean Commercial preliminary plat that the commission saw not that long ago. I've included a aerial photograph that shows the extent of the site as well as the access points that were approved again as part of the Dean Commercial plat. And we'll get into some of the other specifics that staff has noticed as they've reviewed the request and as they actively review some of the other requests that the applicant has submitted. The property as it stands right now is Zone C3 Regional Commercial. And again, a fueling station is a conditional use under that zoning district under the city's zoning code. Adjacent surrounding zoning districts include C2 General Commercial to the north with the Willow Inn Shopping Center and the CVS there, I'm sorry, the Walgreens on the other side of Fox Ridge. To the south, there's the R3B Apartment Community Residential where the lofts at Fox Ridge was previously approved. To the east, you've got your C2 General Commercial and the R3BP, the Apartment Community Plan Residential District, similar to the Manor Homes of Eagle Glen and the CVS on the south side of 58 Highway. And then to the west is the C3. The remainder of the 40 acres of the Dean Commercial is zoned similarly to the subject property, C3 Regional Commercial. The tract overall, the property itself that Hy-Vee is interested in developing is about 2.78 acres. And the future land use map within the growth management plan does classify this specific property as appropriate for commercial development. The major thoroughfare plan inside the GMP classifies 58 Highway as a major arterial and Fox Ridge Drive as a minor collector. Because the CUP request does require a public hearing, tonight's meeting was included in the June 13 edition of the Raymore Journal. Again, the applicant is seeking approval of a conditional use permit for the operation of fueling station on the property. And I will note, and I'll kind of cover it in the staff comments as well, the applicant covered a lot of the different components that their overall product is going to have. The majority of those, the fresh produce sales, the coffee shop, et cetera, those uses are all allowed by right under the C3 zoning district. We're solely talking about the use of the property as a fueling station as a component of the overall project, which facilitates the need for the conditional use permit. Looking at the history of the property, the entire 40 acres, including this site, was zoned from the previous agricultural zoning classification to C3 Regional Commercial in September of 1999. And then again, most recently in May of 2019, the property owner outlined a preliminary plat for the property, which was approved by City Council on May 13th. Again, under staff comments, number one, just to reiterate, the conditional use permit only pertains to the fueling station component of the project. And I believe under the proposed site plan, there's about 16 pumps that would be included in that as far as the overall site. Section 420.030J outlines, because it is a conditional use, there are certain conditions that those types of uses must meet. The ones that are most notable, the storage of vehicles, should the property be used as a repair shop. However, there is no proposal to operate this site as that. The two that I'll point out here, and they're not specifically shown as part of this, but as staff reviews the site plan, we have identified that these conditions have been met. The use of light fixtures that are directed downward or shielded to prevent glare on adjoining property owners, those have been specified in the standards of the different types of lighting fixtures that will be used on the site. And then the canopy lighting that is used on the overall canopy of the gas station must be designed with the recessed fixtures that prevent glare to adjoining property owners as well. The applicant has mentioned multiple times in meetings that that's just the standard of fixtures that they use on their developments, and so what we've reviewed so far meets all the criteria for the conditional use permit for a fueling station. As you'll see in your packet, the proposed conceptual layout does propose a drive-through as part of the development, and so I've included the conditions and the standards that must be met for drive-through facilities within the city of Raymore, including the stacking distance, the dimensions for those spaces, the kind of layout of where those are at so they don't conflict with drive aisles or other parking spaces. And I will note that the proposed layout that they've submitted does comply with all of the regulations for drive-through facilities as well. At this time, the applicant has submitted a final plat application and a site plan, and staff is actively working with the applicant on reviewing those and getting comments back and forth. It was suggested to them that this is the first step in getting the conditional use permit approval before they proceed any further with the site plan and final plat applications, but you can likely expect to see those within the next month or so, I would assume. Again, the proposed site plan shows an access drive onto 58 between the 58 Highway and then Brome Drive, which is that very first access point that you'll see kind of directly across the southern access of the pharmacy there on the east side of Fox Ridge Drive. Because of that, just seeing the close proximity of that access drive to the signalized intersection of 50 and Fox Ridge, and the potential traffic that this use overall could generate. Again, as the applicant mentioned, the one condition that staff would recommend is that the improvements that are constructed as part of this, whatever those might be and how those will look, appropriate measures should be taken to restrict left turns out of the site onto northbound Fox Ridge. With the connection of Brome Drive over to Fox Ridge, there's plenty of space to make a left turn out of there and go north on Fox Ridge. And of course, you can always use the exit onto 58 to go east towards 58 and Fox Ridge as well. And again, the applicant, that condition was shared with the applicant, and they have agreed to that and concur with staff's recommendation. That would still allow for right turns into the site from southbound Fox Ridge, as well as right turns out of the site onto southbound Fox Ridge. And again, left-hand turns onto northbound Fox Ridge from the proposed Brome Drive would still be permitted under that arrangement. Staff has included proposed findings of fact for your consideration in the request. Looking at the schedule here, pending the Planning Commission's recommendation this evening, it would move on to City Council for first reading on July 8th and second reading on July 22nd. Overall, again, as the first step in the overall development of this property, staff does recommend that the Planning and Zoning Commission accept the proposed findings of fact and forward case 19011, Hy-Vee Fast and Fresh conditional use permit for a fueling station to the City Council with a recommendation of approval, subject to the conditions as outlined below. That will conclude staff reports. If there are any questions, I would be more than happy to answer them, and the applicant is still in the audience if you have any specific questions of Hy-Vee themselves. Thank you.
Okay, I need to clarify something. I've got what appears to be a mismatch. So on my case paperwork, I've got 19011 on my agenda. I've got 19013. Are we sure 19011 is correct?
I believe the case number is actually 19013. You are correct, sir.
Oh, okay. So the conditional use permit, 19013. Yeah, good. We'll try to get that right on a motion. Thank you. Okay. Sorry. Commissioner Arkia.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding what we're considering here tonight. So my understanding is the Hy-Vee Fast and Fresh itself has been approved and ready to move forward. All we are considering tonight is the conditional use permit of the fueling station portion of that project, correct?
It is actually the opposite. So the applicant has submitted the site plan application and the final plat. They have not made it to the commission quite yet. In order for them to move forward and finalize their site plan, they wanted the assurance that they could operate the fueling station on the site. So
Okay.
pending the approval tonight, that would impact the arrangement of the site moving forward, with or without the fueling station.
So we're approving whether or not we're okay with the fueling station, and then we'll look at the whole project with the fueling station after, if we approve it.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
You're right. Conditional use permit, fueling station, that's all. Commissioner Wiggins.
Just a quick clarification question. You mentioned Brome Drive multiple times in the architectural drawing. I don't see that anywhere. Is that something that is mislabeled in here? I see Cinnabar Drive, East Glen Drive is one of those. Is that south one? Because you were talking about being able to turn left on from Brome. On here, I see Cinnabar Drive. Is that clarification on that, please?
Great question, and thank you for asking. And I'll apologize on staff's behalf. Since we've been going back and forth with the applicant on their site plan that they submitted, that was one of the comments that we had gotten back to them to correct. Cinnabar and Eagle Glen Drive were just continuations of existing streets over to the west. And so that was just the very first iteration that we saw as part of the Dean commercial. Those streets were renamed and approved with different names, Brome Drive, which you mentioned. So when this comes back forward to Planning and Zoning Commission for the site plan, those street names will be consistent with what they actually should be.
Okay, so just for the sake of this, what is listed on our screens as Cinnabar Drive is permanently
Brome Drive.
known as Brome.
Correct.
That's all.
And to reiterate, the approval of the conditional use permit for the fueling station has no barring on what you're seeing here. This was just a conceptual rendering to show you
Yeah,
what the applicant was thinking.
Right, and I understood that. I just wanted to make sure because you kept mentioning that aspect, and it was different than what I'm seeing on the screen. So thank you for that clarification.
Thank you.
I'm glad you did.
All right, given that information, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to approve the,
You're sorry.
A little early.
We still have a public hearing.
oh, public hearing, yeah, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I forgot. Thank
Okay.
you.
Not quite. I applaud your efforts, but I have to thwart them. If I didn't, Mr. Zer certainly would. Okay, so before I open the public hearing on case 19013, Hy-Vee Fast and Fresh Fueling Station conditional use permit, let me ask anyone in the public who wishes to speak on this case will be given a chance to come forward to the podium. If you choose to do so, please give us your name and address for the record. And Commission would ask that you limit your comments to hopefully no more than 5 minutes tops. And I don't think there's a big enough crowd here tonight that we should have a problem. But if you're in agreement with a position previously stated, if you'll just tell us that rather than going through it all over again, we'd appreciate keeping it moving. Having said that, the public hearing on case 19013 is open. Would anyone in the public like to speak on this case? Please come.
Nope.
Yes. Sorry, we'd like you to come to the podium so we capture you on the microphone, but this is only conditional use permit for a fueling station, which is a requirement of city code. Okay. Anyone from the public that wishes to speak on this case, going once, twice? Close the public hearing on the case, and the floor is...
Now I can make a motion.
Oh, man, you
All
are
right.
eager.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve, to approve case number 1900 and forward this case to City Council.
Yeah.
Or 013.
I'm sorry, 013.
Okay,
Let me start over.
and remember that there was a condition that was recommended by staff.
I didn't get to that part because I screwed
Oh,
up. the-
okay, sorry.
I messed up the case number. All right, I would like to go ahead and make a motion to approve and forward case number 19013, the Hy-Vee Fast and Fresh CUP fueling station, to City Council for a recommendation of approval, subject to the condition that appropriate traffic control measures be incorporated into the site plan to prevent left-hand turning movements onto northbound Fox Ridge from the proposed access drive.
Second.
Okay. Motion by Commissioner Kia, second by Commissioner Wiggins to approve case 19013, Hy-Vee Fast and Fresh fueling station conditional use permit with the one condition noted in the staff report and forward to City Council with recommendation of approval. Mr. Zer, sound legal? Okay, is there any discussion on the motion? All right. I would merely note that I noticed the gas pumps are higher than the store. and if it leaks, it's going to head for the store, and I trust the applicant would be very quick to remedy a problem like that. Little things, probably the reason we require conditional use on fueling stations, right? So, having noted that, let's take a vote on the motion. All those in favor, raise a hand, please. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 in favor, and therefore none opposed, no abstentions. I would also note for the record, Commissioner Bowie arrived at 7:08 p.m., according to my clock, and it's good to see you, sir. All right. Hy-Vee Fast and Fresh, conditional use, moving forward. Thank you. Next case under new business, case 19018. Looks the same on the agenda and the case paperwork, Mr. Gress. So this would be applicant City of Raymore, and Mr. Gress, Mr. Cataret, I bet one of you would like to present the case to us.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Before you this evening, this case is the 31st Amendment to the Unified Development Code regarding medical marijuana facilities located within the city. Since it is an amendment to the text of our Unified Development Code, it does require a public hearing. That was advertised for this evening. I do want to enter into the record our growth management plan, the Unified Development Code, the notice of publication in the Raymore Journal of the public hearing, and the staff report submitted to you this evening. As most of you, I'm sure, are aware, the voters in the state of Missouri passed Amendment 2 to the Missouri Constitution back in November of 2018, establishing a right to access medical marijuana and allowing for the limited production, distribution, sale, and purchase of marijuana for medical purposes. After the adoption of that amendment, the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services, they were tasked with creating the rules to effectuate the provisions of the amendment. It went through a couple of draft provisions, but the final rules were published in May. It provides the guidance in the preparation of ordinances within the different municipalities in the state of Missouri. Amendment 2 does specifically allow Missouri communities to place what's called reasonable time, place, and manner of operation restrictions on facilities. Communities are not allowed to ban the facilities, nor are we allowed to make regulations that would make the creation of what would be overly burdensome regulations, in effect making a ban on the location of the facility. So a lot of work had to go into looking at the zoning of properties in Raymore, looking at existing sensitive land uses to determine the provisions we were going to put within our code to make sure that we had land areas available for all 4 types, or actually 5 types of facilities. So this amendment, the UDC amendment, specifically addresses where facilities can locate within the city. There is a companion ordinance that would establish a new chapter in Raymore City Code. It'd be Chapter 660, dealing with additional regulations, not specific to location, but more specific to things such as hours of operation, odor control, access, things of that nature. I included an early draft code for your review. It's still going through some minor modifications, but it gives you an idea of what that code section will address. Since tonight, again, we're only looking at what zoning districts are the uses allowed and what setbacks are we dealing with. I do want to note the UDC amendment does include a few of the definitions, the terms that we list in our table of uses. Those definitions come directly from the rules that were adopted by the state. We did not modify those definitions at all. Amendment 2 established what would, in essence, would be a maximum setback distance between medical marijuana facilities and certain sensitive land uses. So they established, they being the state, rules established the 1,000-foot buffer between facilities and schools, child daycare centers, and churches. In our Unified Development Code, we took a look at those setbacks as well as setbacks from residential structures. So other land uses that we provide specific setback distances for, such as alcohol sales, adult entertainment facilities, we have similar setback distances from the sensitive land uses as well as residential structures. But again, we took into account, looking in great detail, what setbacks would allow reasonable land uses, and I'll touch on that in a moment. One of the other setbacks that we are incorporating within the ordinance is a distance between licensed facilities. We don't necessarily want two dispensaries located within, a short distance or next to each other. So as we have in the other uses that we regulate, there is a minimum separation distance between the uses. Amendment 2 does also allow qualified patients and caregivers, primary caregivers, to do homegrown marijuana where they're allowed to, within their residence or on their residential property, grow up to 6 flowering plants within their home. And so the regulations of the companion ordinance deals with that, but I wanted to point that out. We're not allowing the facilities on residential zone property or within structures that have residential units other than the unit that you would live in. And that's why you see in our proposed land use tables the different zoning designations where we would allow. Going to the actual table for the uses themselves, which is the draft bill before you, the cultivation facilities, medical marijuana cultivation facility would be a permitted use within our agricultural district. The cultivation of outdoor facilities would be a conditional use in our business park or in our manufacturing district, which is our M1 and our M2 districts. If the cultivation facility is indoor, it would be allowed as a permitted use in our business park M1 and M2 facilities. The dispensary facilities we're identifying as permitted uses in all of our commercial districts are C1, C2, C3, as well as our business park M1 and M2. The infused products manufacturing facilities we're identifying as appropriate for our business park M1 and M2 as permitted uses. And then the testing facilities would be permitted use in our professional office as well as all of our commercial districts, our business park, and our manufacturing districts. At your desk this evening, I also provided you with an amended copy of the bill that was in your packet to include transportation facilities. When I completed the initial research, did place a lot of emphasis on the transportation facilities, but based upon some very recent work that I've looked at and researched, we do need to provide for transportation facilities as a use in which we would propose that those be allowed within our business park and our manufacturing districts. In the ordinance, then, when we look at the actual location restrictions, I've broken it down between the actual facility and, again, the different sensitive land uses. So for location of the outdoor medical marijuana cultivation facilities, we are proposing to stick with the 1,000-foot separation distance, which would be between elementary, secondary schools, the daycare centers, and religious assemblies, as well as within 1,000 feet of a residence. The difference there is when we're measuring the setbacks, when we look at the elementary school, daycare centers, religious assemblies, we're doing it from property lines. When we're making the measurements from residents, we're not doing it from the property line, we're doing it from the actual residential structure. So just a differentiation. We had to do that in order to, again, provide for adequate areas for the facilities. When we go to indoor medical marijuana cultivation, it drops down to 500-foot separation. When we look at the medical marijuana, the production facilities, the manufacturing facilities, and the transportation facilities, we also have that set at the 500-foot setback level. For the dispensaries or the testing facilities, we have a proposed 500-foot buffer between the schools, daycare center, and religious assemblies. We had to drop that down to 100-foot separation from any residential structure. Again, if we didn't do that, we would not have adequate areas at all for the facilities. It would be so restrictive, we could probably point to just one location in the city where we would allow a dispensary. So that was too restrictive. That's why we proposed keeping the 500-foot from the schools, daycare, religious assemblies, but dropping it to 100-foot from a residence. So those are the proposed setbacks that we have within our ordinance. Again, when you look at other communities, each community has a little bit different setback. And partly the reason for that is simply each community is a little different. Our community has a lot of corridor-type commercial zoning with residential right behind it. So we can't have a greater setback than 100-foot, or we're discounting all of the land area that's zoned commercial. The same with where our industrial properties are located at. We had to look at the 500-foot setback in order to allow adequate industrial area where they could do the indoor cultivation or the manufacturing or the transportation facilities. So we took a lot of great care, did a lot of different maps showing the available land areas for the different types of facilities. So quite a bit of care went into establishing those actual setback numbers. But, you know, if you watch the news or look at other communities, they're all over the board between no setbacks. A lot of communities just have 0 setbacks because they want the facilities within their community, where other communities, because they have, you know, greater land areas available, can go with the 1,000-foot setback for all the uses. So that was the rationale behind the location restrictions that we have within our code. So staff has submitted proposed findings of fact regarding this UDC text amendment this evening. In looking at the schedule, if we, as a planning commission, do make a recommendation this evening, this would go on to city council, first reading July 8th, second reading July 22nd. It is, we consider it very important to stay on the time schedule that we have here. Applications are officially due to the state on August 3rd, and one of the requirements for application is to have, in essence, a verification from the city that the address location they're selecting for the facility does meet all of our requirements. So we would like to have the ordinance in effect before the August 3rd application opening date. Staff, again, looking at going through all the research that we went through for the request, prepared the amendment to the UDC based upon, again, the right to access the medical marijuana facilities. We reviewed all the rules from the Department of Health and Senior Services to ensure that these requirements that we're proposing, not only in the UDC amendment, but also the companion ordinance, are in full compliance with the laws of the state. Again, we looked very closely at the buffers between the land uses, making sure we're protecting those sensitive land uses that we want to protect as a community, but also, again, opening up our community to allow the facilities. Again, based upon all that information, we do recommend the commission accept the proposed findings that we submitted, and forward this case, the 31st Amendment to the Unified Development Code, to the City Council with a recommendation of approval. That would conclude staff comments on the request.
Thank you, Mr. Carteret. All right, this case also requires public hearing. And remembering what I said before about public hearings, unless anyone has a pressing question for staff right now, I'll open the floor for the public hearing on case 19018, 31st Amendment to UDC medical marijuana facilities. Mr. Zerk.
Chairman, if I might, I just want to make sure and point out, for the commission's purposes this evening, you are only voting with regard to the proposed ordinance for the approval of the distances. You've been provided with Bill 3469 for reference purposes, which will be the companion ordinance that's forwarded along, but really you are focusing your attention on the one. Just want to make sure and clarify that before we get too far down a rabbit hole.
I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, so we'll open the public hearing on case 19018. Would anyone like to speak on this case? Please come forward and
Carrie Woods, North Park Drive. I just wanted to clarify the distances. Now, I know they were talking about setbacks. Is this 100 feet of any residence in the Missouri law? In the original?
I think I'm going to call on Mr. Grass if you have that, or Mr. Cataract, sorry, if you have that at the tip of your fingers.
Within the amendment and the draft rules, there is not a specific setback between the facilities and a residential structure. We are adding that within our code provisions. So there was no guidance given by the state. I mean, they did not indicate that residential was a sensitive land use.
So then my understanding is you're trying to shorten the distances to residences so that you can build closer to residences? Is that? And schools or?
Are you referring to the verbiage where it talked about 1,000 feet? And then
Right, and the
but it didn't- but then
500.
Yeah, but then it also tells you in there that the city can't, even if the 1,000 feet is what is recommended, if we can't justifiably put in these places with those distances, then we have to adjust that distance so that we allow this to be here in our city. We don't have a choice. And so
Okay.
the distances they proposed are so that we can meet the state's guidelines by having commercially zoned areas that can provide space for this type of business.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Urquia. All right. Anyone else from the public that would like to speak on case 19018, please come forward. All right, I'll close the public hearing on this case and open the floor for discussion by the commission. Commissioner Wiggins.
Thank you. Just a couple of little quick questions on this. So item N, 1, E, and F, we refer to property line of the facility, closest point to the property line of a school, daycare, et cetera, or an F, talking about facility entrance, if it's a multi-tenant building. So just for clarification, if one of our main commercial developments, i.e. Willow Wind, if somebody is on the far east portion next to Dogs Arf Us, let's say somebody puts in a dispensary there, they're not qualified to enter there, right? Because technically 1,000 feet to the west is actually where the property line of the development is, and that's next to a piece of property that's owned by the church and is a church facility. So are we being too constrictive, or is that a state regulation, or is that one of our regulations? Is that too restrictive? Because we're saying if they're in a multi-tenant building, the distance from the facility to the daycare school, whatever, shall be measured from the property line of the daycare school or center to the closest point of a facility's entrance. And so in a large spot like that, they could be at the far end of a facility, but if a church is over there and it's right next to the parking lot, then that commercial location is out.
So what we have to look at is, if you gave the example of Willowwood, which is commercial zone property, so we're only talking dispensaries at that
Yes, sir.
point. So the setback with the dispensary from the sensitive land use of the church is 500 feet. So 500 feet gets you to about Missouri Mud, for example, in a shopping center.
But this specifically says the facility, like, are we talking about the facility of sorry, maybe that's a clarification point. Are we talking about the door to the dispensary, or are we talking about the end of the commercial Platts entrance to the parking lot?
Are you under E? Are you under what section?
I'm sorry. Well, I was kind of looking at both E and F.
Different.
Yeah.
So with
So
E,
F is multi-tenant, so that would be Willow Wind.
so E, let's take an example.
Sure, please.
We
Thank
have
you.
a freestanding building, and they're the only land use on that property. We're going to measure from the property line of the facility to the property line of the sensitive land use, the church or the daycare. In Willowwind, it's a tenant space, so we're measuring from the property line of the church to the door.
The door. Okay, that's why I wanted
So that
okay.
falls under the F.
Okay, so maybe I just misinterpreted
Yes.
that as being the property's entrance, and so maybe, I don't know if anybody else read it that way, or if I just got way too deep in the weeds on that one. No pun intended.
Oh,
Somebody picked up.
took a while. Thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
One further clarification.
Please, absolutely.
Because we do see the sensitive land uses go in shopping centers now. Churches more often maybe than a daycare, but you do see both. In those instances, we measure from the door to the door.
Okay, cool. And I guess it did kind of spur for H, no medical marijuana dispensary shall be located in a building that contains a residence. And I understand that from one point where we are right now, but I also think back to the presentations that, Mr. Tapp has provided to council and commission about, a grand plan of, maybe someday down North Cass we'll have soccer fields and community entertainment, and we'll have hotels and shopping, and maybe we'll have apartments on top of those commercial spaces that would probably be good locations for a dispensary. Are we putting ourselves too far? Are we future-proofing ourselves with that kind of piece? I mean, you think of it, and obviously we're not an urban core, we're suburban pushing on the edge of rural, but, who's to say one day we wouldn't have a multi-use development where we have commercial space on the bottom with 2 or 3 levels of residence above, and, that'd probably be someplace maybe somebody would want some medical marijuana.
We certainly gave that consideration because, in talking with Mr. Tapp on what's proposed as some of our commercial areas, there is potential for residential mixed-use developments. We felt that was a little bit of the exception. We wanted to make it very clear in this ordinance that we were not going to allow them where residential structures existed. So we took preference in protecting the residential components of a mixed-use development and felt that kind of overrode the potential for having a dispensary in a multi-use building. We just thought, make it very clear, black and white, you cannot have it in a residential structure or within a residential facility.
Okay. So would that allow in the future, A, for adjustment, and B, since obviously we're talking about commercial zoned property versus residential zoned property, so it's not like someone's all of a sudden going to come and say, hey, can I rezone my house in Eagle Glen to be commercial so that I can, obviously it's totally different, it's commercial property versus residential zoning. So I don't want to pigeonhole us into something that, 5 years from now, all of a sudden somebody wants to come put in a huge place and we say sorry.
At that point, they'd need to amend the UDC or seek a variance of some type.
Okay. Just want to make sure that that's on the table.
Commissioner Bowie.
Quick question. Kind of in the same vein, looking down the road a little bit, I'm looking at K. I think it's on page 4 of the ordinance at the top. When a new school, daycare, religious facility, or residence is located within a location restriction area is applicable, the medical marijuana use may continue to operate indefinitely. So what was your thought process behind that? And I'm looking at maybe potential, would that be a restriction, maybe possibly restrict potential, people that want to, when you look to go about build a new school, are you going to say, oh, there's a dispensary there, we can't do it there because they will continue to operate so what was the thought process behind that?
It's providing some protection to the uses that legally located within that shopping center at the time they filed their application. They're going to go to great lengths to select a location, and they have to, when they look at that location, they have to meet all those setbacks. They find that place, they move in, and they're good to go. They need to have some protection as well from whether it be a church or a daycare center simply being able to move into the shopping center and suddenly kick them out. The facility, the church, the daycare, they know the dispensary is there. They can make the choice. We're not prohibiting them from moving within that distance. All we're saying is that you moving in does not force them to move out. So
Legal would take the position as well that once you've given them that right to the property at that location and the use at that location, you could not take that away from them without substantially harming their business and their operations. So from legal's perspective, K needs to remain in.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see. Other questions or comments on the case? Commissioner Kia.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and do what I do.
Somebody's got to carry the load.
And I'll make a motion to approve case number 19018 and forward it to City Council on the distances for medical marijuana facilities and everything that's been outlined.
Second.
I don't know if that was a good enough motion.
Well, we'll see if I can restate it. So motion by Commissioner Urquia, second by Commissioner Crane to accept staff proposed findings of fact on case 19018, 31st Amendment to the UDC regarding medical marijuana facilities and forward to City Council with recommendation of approval. That work? All right. Is there any discussion on the motion? And seeing none, all those in favor, raise a hand, please. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Got 9 in favor. Therefore, none opposed, no abstentions. Thank you.
Matt, if we want to be compliant with this.
And we will move ahead on our agenda. Mr. Zur, City Council report, if you would be so kind.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to provide that this evening. I'm actually going to go back to the June 10th City Council meeting based upon the lack of actual meeting at the last go-around for the Planning and Zoning Commission. June 10th, the only item of real issue that I would identify for concern for the Planning and Zoning Commission did not actually come before the Planning and Zoning Commission, but it may help facilitate future development. And at that time, the City Council made its first reading for the vacation of a number of easements in order to facilitate the development of the Good Ranch property. The next meeting that occurred on June 24th saw a second reading and approval of that vacation of those easements, again clearing out a couple of sewer easements and access easements that were not being utilized, and the city did not anticipate utilizing them. They had been on the books since about 1988. The original owner of the property, or the owner of the property who is seeking to attempt development, had requested the city to abandon those or to vacate those easements. In between the June 10th and the June 24th meeting, there was a special meeting of the City Council. That meeting, the City Council voted to award a contract for solid waste disposal to Constable Solid Waste. So from a perspective of everyone within the community being an interest in who is going to be with removing their solid waste, that is of interest, though not specifically as to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Finally, on June 24th, we had the City Council evaluating a number of items that came before you, including the 30th Amendment to the UDC. You will recall this involves the approval and ability to maintain chickens in residential portions of the city. Unfortunately, the city, sorry, let me rephrase that, my apologies. The 30th UDC was not approved by the City Council at that time. The next item on the agenda was the Conway Place rezoning. That was requested to be continued for Planning and Zoning to provide their input and review, and the applicant has since that time placed the matter on a hold. So I would anticipate that would be coming back for you to consider at the applicant's request later on. Finally, the Conway Place preliminary development plan, similarly with the former Conway Place rezoning, has been continued for Planning and Zoning input and review, and the applicant has since that time placed the matter on hold for further development of the application. So I believe Community Development is holding those applications in their current status. That would complete the City Council report.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Zur. Mr. Mayor, anything to add to that? Okay.
Mr. Zur did a good job.
All right, as always. All right, Mr. Cataret, Mr. Gress, we would move ahead to the staff report, please.
Thank you, sir. Looking ahead at our scheduled meetings, you'll see on the monthly report that we currently do not have any applications scheduled for your upcoming meetings. The Hy-Vee site plan and the final plat are kind of looming out there at the moment. As I mentioned in the staff report, we're working with them right now to make those revisions and get some additional information on the kind of the public improvements that are going to be required as part of that project. So at this point, I wouldn't say the project's on hold, but it's delayed a little bit as far as the timeline. There is the possibility that it could be scheduled for the July 16th meeting, in which case I will communicate that to you all. There's also on consent agenda would be the Edgewater 7th plat, which was pulled off the agenda a few meetings ago. The engineering staff has received the appropriate plans that they needed to review that. And so once I get the green light from the Public Works Department Engineering, you'll see that coming back before you as well. But as it stands right now, we do not have any items permanently scheduled for our July 16th meeting, and I'll be in contact with you all as soon as I can so that you can make the appropriate arrangements to either be here or not for that meeting. To update you on the meeting that took place before the Planning and Zoning, our Board of Adjustment actually met this evening at 6 o'clock to consider and approve an application for a secondary residential driveway access for a property in Skyview Estates, which is just to the west of J Highway, north of Heron Street. In the R1 zoning district, secondary driveways are actually not permitted. However, given the location and the characteristics of that neighborhood being a little bit larger lots, the Board of Adjustment did approve that. So that individual will move forward. They have submitted plans for I believe a 30 by 60 pole barn, and that individual wanted the ability to have a secondary driveway to that. So that was approved this evening by the Board of Adjustment. On July 16th, the Board of Adjustment will actually meet again for an application that was filed for a lot in Creekmore in the Westbrook subdivision, a very unique shaped lot that's the last one on the cul-de-sac. The current property owner and builder for that site is having a difficult time arranging a home on that property to correctly meet the setbacks for that, and so they've requested a slight reduction in their rear yard. It butts right up to the golf course, and so wouldn't have a significant impact on the adjacent property owners directly behind it. So stay tuned for that. The Board of Adjustment will review that application on July 16th. Other than that, that would conclude staff report from our end. As you'll notice, Mr. Rokos took off soon after the conditional use permit application. He had a very long day out at Hawk Ridge Park in the heat, keeping an eye on the contractors. They finish up, hopefully this week, the paving. So he asked me in his absence to provide some updates for you all with regards to engineering. So as I mentioned, Hawk Ridge Park is still moving along. They're doing some paving, some much-needed paving. I know they've been eager to get that done. Thankfully, the weather has allowed it. I believe they finished the first coat, at least, on the northern parking lot at the end of Johnston Drive, and they were finishing up the south parking lot, I think, today as well. So a lot of work going on out there that has kept his staff very, very busy. The Evanbrook subdivision at the very southern terminus of Sunset Lane is nearly completed. They've got some minor site work, some street signs to put up and stop signs, and that will open up a handful of lots down there for new permits to finish out that void in that subdivision. So we're really excited about that. Prairie View, the Good Ranch, which the commission saw, I believe, back in mid-2017, just off of North Cass Parkway and Hubach Hill, Brook Parkway. It kind of comes down to about a triangular shaped development there. That developer is moving forward with, I believe, 29 lots. So a portion of that subdivision that was approved before, a phase 1 and phase 2, if you will. They're currently working on sewers right now, so still a lot of infrastructure work going on down there before those lots will be released. Over in Oak Ridge Farms, the two-family residential development there behind the post office, they have paved the connection of Washington Street down to the point. So that connection has been made, and they're making some improvements to the water lines there, and we can probably hope to see those lots available probably within the next month or so to finish out the second phase of the Oak Ridge Farms development. Westbrook 15th, which is the connection of Rannoch Drive, kind of the southern terminus of Creekmore Drive right now, before you get to the construction road. Those lots are down to the punch list, and there's some other improvements that are required off-site that staff's working on reviewing as well. So hopefully here before too long, within the next couple of months, those lots will come online as well. And as I mentioned in our staff report, Edgewater 7th and Creekmore, they did receive final plans for review, and they're working with the applicant on that. So the commission can likely expect to see that within the next couple of meetings or so for their consideration. I think that would conclude staff report from engineering. If there are any questions, I can do my best to answer them, or I can reach out to Mr. Rokos for any clarification.
Questions for Mr. Grass? Nope. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, we'll open the floor for public comment. Kind of the same rules as before, or the same request as before. If you wish to speak to the commission this evening, please come forward to the podium, give us your name and address for the record. And seeing no one, we'll open the floor for commission member comment. Vice Chair Fizer, may I start with you?
I have a few things. Actually, first, I want to say thank you to staff and to Mr. Zur for helping out with our last sort of non-meeting. It was kind of confusing, and we were not sure what to do, and so they kind of handled things, and we had a full house, so it was great that they were able to handle things. I assume it went well. We had to leave, so I'm going to assume it went well. A second thing is today I was reading about in Oregon, they passed some rules about zoning, and they were calling it YIMBY, which is yes in my backyard. And they were basically outlawing single-family zoning. And I'm not sure if I'm for or against it, but it was really interesting, and I would encourage everyone to kind of see what that's about. It was mainly to bring more affordable housing into cities that didn't have a lot, but so it was interesting. So might look up a YIMBY. And the last thing is the Arts Commission mural at Recreation Park is probably finishing up the end of this week, and I would encourage everyone to go look at it. It's very bright and vibrant, and I think it makes our park look cool, for one thing, and not like every other park. So I think something to go see. Thank you.
Wow, good, thank you. Commissioner Wiggins?
Didn't realize you were going to go to this side so fast.
I never know.
Thank you, staff, as always, for everything you do. Other than that, I hope everybody has a wonderful and safe 4th of July. Hopefully, you keep all of your fingers and toes. And beyond that, I guess I would just note, I noticed today, so thanks to city staff, I don't think I noticed it prior to today, but popping up around town are white signs that tell you what your new trash day is. So if you haven't seen that, you should keep an eye out for that. But I guess having new trash in about 2 weeks, so that's going to be fun and exciting to start, I guess.
Thank you. Secretary Crane?
Well, tonight's my last meeting. The town has changed tremendously since I moved down here 43 years ago from Independence with my wife and kids. My boy will be 50 this fall. Wow. I've worked with a lot of people for a lot of years on the commission, and I'm encouraged that the groundwork that they laid will continue on with you guys.
Thank you, sir, and you will be missed. Commissioner Armstrong?
Just thank you to staff and everybody. Have a safe 4th.
Thank you. I hate to interrupt. Commissioner Akia?
He has a motion.
I was just wondering, yeah, I'd like to make a motion for cake and ice cream for farewell to Commissioner Crane.
Yeah. That sounds great. I was afraid you were going to make a motion to adjourn. And
No,
not
no,
quite
no,
there.
no. I'll let everybody else make their comments before we get to that point.
All right, thank you.
But I will apologize for my absence of the last meeting. I didn't realize it was going to be such a big deal. And I was giving a financial presentation to homeless folks who are transitioning back into working and living in an actual home. So I apologize for my tardiness that turned into an absence, because I did come like I said I would, but apparently it was about 10, 15 minutes too late. But otherwise, as always, thank you to the staff for everything you all do. Appreciate your work in making our jobs super easy. And look forward to these developments as they move forward, and to Commissioner Crane's point, the continued growth and progress of the city of Raymore.
Yeah, thank you.
And you will be missed, Commissioner Crane.
Commissioner Peterman?
Thanks to staff for all the hard work you guys do. And thanks to Commissioner Pfizer for working through the car having a little engine knock, and we're sitting on the side of the road a couple times, but we worked through it. Some were here and some weren't, but we got through it, and we're here again tonight. Thank you. Have a good 4th.
Mayor Turnbow?
Yeah, I just want to thank Mr. Crane, Commissioner Crane as well. He's been great to work with. He's left his fingerprints on a lot of projects here in the city over it's been over a decade, hasn't it? I mean, gosh, I don't know how long. I didn't even look back to see how long it's been. Yeah. So it's been, he's seen a lot of changes come around here, and his input has been invaluable.
To Silver Lake was gravel.
But thank you for that, sir. And thanks to staff for a great report tonight. And I just want to wish everybody a happy 4th and be safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bowie, we're glad to see you this evening.
Glad to see you. Always got to follow the mayor. That's always a tough act. All right. Just a couple things, real small. Commissioner Crane, glad to have worked with you the last 4 years. Appreciate your service and what you've done for the city. Thank you, staff, for your work as well. And hopefully everybody has a good July 4th. If there's a meeting on July 16th, I'm not going to be able to be here because I'll be out of town. So just a heads up for you guys to know that. I apologize about not missing last time, but just wanted to let you guys know that I may not be here if we do have a meeting. So otherwise, thank you all, everybody. Happy Independence Day.
Right. You realize now I have to follow you.
I'm an easy act to follow.
Oh, tough act to follow. Thanks to Commissioner Crane, Secretary Crane. We certainly appreciate all the years of your service, and we'll miss you. I assume we'll have something on the agenda for next meeting, whenever that is, to fill that position of secretary. So look forward to that. I think we already have at least one volunteer, which is a very good thing. Thank you. We'll keep you guessing till next time. Staff, thank you. I did note Mr. Rocco's bailed at the first opportunity, and of course we get a chuckle out of that, but at least he left you the notes, and thank you for giving us that update on Hawk Ridge Park. Mr. Zur, it's always good to see you. Thanks for trying to keep us straight. And unless anyone else has anything to add this evening, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second. Oh, I'm sorry.
So moved.
Okay, who's the second?
Commissioner Crane?
Oh, all right. I don't know, but motion by Commissioner Urquilla. Let's give Commissioner Crane the second. All those in favor, raise a hand, please. And we are adjourned, 9-0. Thank you. I think it's the hot weather.
We should drop in every once in a while.
Oh, my goodness.
Make sure you guys are accurate.
Good luck with that procedure.